Welcome back to Praxis. We've been going over the last few weeks looking at the practice of worship, and I want to kind of bring that to land this week as we look at how we worship God with our emotions. We are, as human beings, emotional beings. If we're to bring the whole of ourselves to the worship of God, then we can't hide that from Him. We've got to learn to bring that side of who we are to Him in worship. We just need to read through the Psalms and we see just tons of expressions of emotion in worship to God. On almost every page, the psalmist is whether explicitly or kind of implicitly, you can kind of just read it in the tone, expressing in an emotional way their worship to God. The psalmist expresses emotions of joy and of gratefulness and of sorrow and of doubt and of worry. They're all there and they're all valid expressions of worship to God that he encourages. Jesus, when asked what the greatest commandment is, says, love the Lord your God with all your what? Heart, soul, mind and strength. We're supposed to bring our emotional side of ourselves to worshipping Jesus. Paul writes in Ephesians 5:19, he says, sing and make music from your heart to the Lord. In Colossians 3:16, he says, let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom through psalms, hymns and songs from the Spirit, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts. We're called to worship God with our emotions, lifting our emotions as we respond to Jesus, to him in worship. But I think some of us find that easier than others. Some of us would probably say we're not very emotional. Now, the reality is we're all emotional because we're all human. It's just some of us, and I'm like this, aren't particularly in tune with our emotions. We've not really developed that side of ourselves. We don't really enjoy engaging that side of ourselves. It's just harder for us. I'll have an argument with my wife and it will take me 24 hours to realise that I'm actually a bit upset by it. It can take me a long time to just work out what it is I'm even feeling, let alone express that. And so for some of us, this is harder than others, but that doesn't give us a get out, because if we ignore bringing our emotions to God in worship, we're essentially just holding something of ourselves back from him in worship. So how do we lift our emotions to God in worship? I want to suggest two quick things. One, when you think upon Jesus, when you're reminded of something he's done for you, of something of who he is, and that just evokes something in you, that might be joy, that might be sadness, might be disappointment. But regardless of what that emotion is, lift it to Jesus. As we have our emotions touched and affected by a view of who God is and what he's done for us, lift that up to him in worship. Say, God, I just feel really joyful when I think of you today. God, I just feel really sorrowful when I think of what's going on at the moment because I feel like you're not doing anything. Whatever that emotion is, lift it to him as you feel it in worship. Second thing that I think can really help us with this is make use of music. I think one of the beauties of music, and I think it's a gift from God to help us in this, is it can help us engage not just our minds, which is important as we looked at last week, but also our emotions in worshipping God. There's a massive difference between saying the words, "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me." It's true, it's worship, but there's something lacking when we sing, when we engage in music, when we allow that, it just helps us engage a whole nother part of ourselves in worshipping God. And so maybe this week, you want to take a bit of time, maybe just once in the week, to just put a piece of music on. It could be an instrumental piece, it could be a worship song, and just use that to help you express and lift your kind of emotions to God in worship. We want to practice this practice of worship. It's so key, it's foundational, and we want to lift every single bit of ourselves to worship: our bodies, our minds, and our emotions. And so let's continue practicing these things. Let's continue pushing ourselves a little bit more and growing ourselves in this incredible practice of worship.